The Packers are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. Adam, what can you tell us about that last pick?
Well, I'm a little surprised to hear his name get called at this point. But if you look at what he did at his pro day, it'll make a little bit more sense. He's always been gifted with speed, but he was in a scheme where he was kept to just running deep routes and creating space in the middle of the field. He was a good team player and never complained about his role, but you can see it in his pro day that he has the ability to be so much more. We'll have to wait until game day, however, to see if that was just a fluke or if this guy's the real deal.
The Eagles are now on the clock. All right, let's go to Adam Schefter, who's got more on this pick.
He's a Heisman winner that got a lot of recognition this season for not just dominating as a receiver, but also as a shutdown defender. His dual threat ability is rare to come by in the modern era of college football, and man, was it fun to watch him all season. He'll probably be focusing on just one position going forward, but the team has the benefit of making that choice based on its scheme and needs. He's going to be an interesting rookie to watch, and he has the potential to have a huge impact for this team early in his career.
The Steelers are now on the clock. Let's go to Adam now, who's got more on the Steelers' last pick.
Just when you thought his draft stock couldn't be any higher, here's a guy that goes out and puts on an absolute show in the College All-Star Game, being named the game's MVP. Several GMs I spoke to cite that performance as the reason many draft experts, including Matt Miller, labeled him as the clear-cut #1 quarterback in this year's draft. He's never backed down from a challenge, and I can only imagine he's chomping at the bit to meet with the coaching staff as soon as possible to begin his NFL journey.
The Bills are now on the clock. All right, team is now off the clock. Adam Schefter, can you tell us about their newest player?
A veritable interception machine, he holds his college's single-game record for interceptions in a game, snagging 3. Scouts pointed to an almost sixth sense when the ball was in the air, and Matt Miller had him ranked as the top defensive back in the draft in his final mock. True lockdown defensive backs are few and far between, and this is a pick that should solidify this team's pass defense for years to come. It'll be very interesting to see if opposing offenses go right after him, and how if he shows any rust after being avoided for much of his final year in college.
The Giants are now on the clock. Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Chiefs are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. Our very own Adam Schefter has more to say about this pick.
The old saying of "what have you done for me lately" could be used to explain his rapid rise in draft value. After a late-season performance that saw him make several key blocks leading to scores, sources said that many scouts were willing to overlook otherwise average statistics leading up to his final game. NFL expert Ross Tucker felt that his upside far outweighs any concerns that he's a one-hit wonder. Tucker raved about his natural footwork that he called a quote-unquote gift for someone his size. Patience may be needed to help him grow into his full potential, but this team feels as if it has bolstered its offensive line with this big pick.
Been made. Let's go to Adam Schefter to hear more about the player.
Experts will debate the value of the IQ test at the combine each and every day after the fact. But the one thing a player doesn't want to do is turn in the worst score. And this year, it was him. He tested very poorly, and a lot of scouts are of the opinion that he shouldn't have tested at all in the first place. On the bright side, there is a real history of players excelling in the NFL who turned in low IQ scores. I'm sure the GM kept that in mind when making this selection.
The Redskins are now on the clock. Well, if you're wondering what the delay is, I think we've got a trade coming here. The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. All right, now that the pick's in, let's go to Adam. Adam, what can you tell us about this guy?
He got the attention of scouts pretty quickly when he had a game-winning catch that most receivers would have trouble bringing in. With one outstretched hand, he caught a pass that looked like it was about to sail out of the back of the end zone. He proved that even the big guys can make some incredible plays with their hands. And in a league where receiving tight ends are becoming a premium, it's no wonder this team took him here.
Colts are now on the clock. Now that Ryan's been picked, Adam, what do you know?
Been told by several scouts and GMs that he fell short of their expectations at the Combine, and that's a review you never want to leave Indy with. Matt Miller told me he was surprised to see him struggle at the bench press, especially for a guy his size. On top of that, his footwork looks sluggish, and he dropped most of his passes in receiver drills. Right now, I can't say if he fits the mold of a blocker or a receiving tight end, but we'll see how they line him up during the preseason.
He's off the board now, Adam, so tell us what you know about Spencer.
He entered the season drawing comparisons to some of the most feared defensive linemen in NFL history after a midseason disappearing act that saw him record just 2 tackles in 5 games. Many scouts were left shaking their heads in disbelief. Even with the growing concern over his lack of production, there were some GMs who felt his poor stat lines were a direct result of the increased focus he began receiving as a result of his hot start. One pointed specifically to reports of offensive coordinators fashioning entire game plans around avoiding him, knowing that his fellow linemen were incapable of picking up his mantle. He'll now have a chance to prove believers right, as he's expected to see significant playing time in the preseason with a line far superior to the one he had in college.
The Packers are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Colts are now on the clock. Adam, tell us more about Moore.
A phenomenal two-sport athlete, this is a kid who was chosen in the first round of this year's baseball draft. Many a GM I spoke to openly questioned whether or not the allure of being such a high-round pick, coupled with his potential signing bonus, would shift his focus from the commitment needed to succeed in the NFL. Due to the speculation, his draft stock tumbled in several mocks, leading our very own Todd McShay to crown him as one of the top value picks in this year's draft. One can't help but wonder just how good he could be if he were to completely devote himself to football. I'm sure this owner will challenge him to find out, no doubt preparing a hefty signing bonus and incentive-laden contract should he leave baseball in the past.
The Chargers are now on the clock. The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Texans are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock. The Giants are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Colts are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock.
Bills just made their pick. Adam, what can you tell us about it?
It's no surprise seeing him get drafted at this point, considering he was one of the hottest running backs in college this year. When's the last time he rushed for less than 100 yards in a game? If you check, it was actually 2 seasons ago, and that was due to a minor injury. The guy's a threat to take it to the house every time he touches the ball. And if he gets by that first tackle, watch out, because it's daylight from there on. As long as he can quickly adjust to the speed of the NFL, he has the potential to be a great back for this team.
The Chargers are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The 49ers are now on the clock. The Texans are now on the clock.
The Buccaneers have made their selection. What can we tell you about him? That's why we have Adam Schefter.
He came to his pro day looking a little bit slimmer than he was at the combine. That weight loss seemed to help as he ran a faster 40 and 3 cone drill than he did at the combine. However, he turned in fewer reps on the bench and had less of a burst in his vertical. While he was able to gain some speed, it came at the cost of some of his strength. Now that he's on a team, they'll work with him to make sure he's at an ideal playing size for his role on the line.
Titans are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Falcons are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Colts are now on the clock. The Steelers are now on the clock. The Lions are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. The Giants are now on the clock. The Falcons are now on the clock. The Rams are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock.
Adam Schefter now has got more to say about the Redskins' latest pick.
One of this draft's toughest players, here's a guy who played the majority of his final collegiate season with a broken foot. Long suffering with plantar fasciitis in the affected foot, doctors discovered several hairline fractures across the first, second, and third metatarsals during a routine therapy session. Translation? His foot was essentially shattered. Recovery took months, and he used the time wisely, studying film of just about every NFL team and preparing for interviews. No surprise that he blew scouts and even a few GMs away with his knowledge of NFL offensive schemes. This is an intelligent, hard-nosed defensive back who's going to make his fair share of big plays before his professional career is over.
The Rams are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock. The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Texans are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Colts are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock. The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Chargers are now on the clock. The 49ers are now on the clock. The Texans are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock.